On a sultry July morning in 2024, Dubai police received an emergency call from the exclusive Palm Jumeirah neighborhood. A young woman had been found dead in a luxurious penthouse apartment overlooking the Arabian Gulf. The circumstances of her death would soon reveal a story of passion, betrayal, and deadly revenge that would pierce the glittering facade of one of the world's richest cities. Anika Desai was 21 years old when her life came to a tragic end. Born and raised in Pune, a thriving city in the western Indian state of Maharashtra, she had always dreamed of a life beyond India's borders. Her family belonged to the country's growing middle class. Her father, Rajesh Desai, worked as an engineer for a medium-sized renewable energy company, and her mother, Priya, ran a small boutique in the city centre. Anika was the eldest of 3 children and carried the hopes and expectations of her entire family on her shoulders. From an early age, Anika had distinguished herself through exceptional intelligence and unbridled ambition. She had been an outstanding student, graduating from high school with top marks and securing a place to study business administration at a prestigious university in Mumbai. But Anika wanted more. She dreamed of the glittering skyscrapers of Dubai, of business opportunities in the Middle East, of a life of luxury and international significance. For her, Dubai represented everything she wanted to achieve: modernity, prosperity, and limitless opportunities. In January 2023, after completing her bachelor's degree, Anika found a job as an assistant in the marketing department of an up-and-coming real estate company in Dubai. The position was not particularly high-ranking, but it offered her the long-awaited entry into the business world of the Emirates. With mixed feelings of excitement and nervousness, Anika said goodbye to her family at Mumbai airport. Her mother cried as she hugged her daughter. Her father pressed a small gold pendant with the image of the goddess Lakshmi into her hand and said, "May she protect you and bring you luck, my child. Never forget who you are and where you come from." The first few months in Dubai were a mixture of fascination and overwhelm for Anika. The city was even more impressive than in her wildest dreams. The imposing skyline, dominated by the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world, the artificial islands, the luxurious shopping malls with designer stores whose prices exceeded her monthly salary, the endless rows of luxury cars on the immaculate streets. Everything radiated prosperity and modernity. At the same time, Dubai was a city of stark contrasts. Behind the shiny facade, millions of migrant workers from South Asia, the Middle East and Africa worked in often precarious conditions. Anika herself belonged to the growing class of young professionals from India who were seeking better career opportunities in the Emirates. She shared her apartment with 2 other young Indian women in the Dera area, one of Dubai's older neighborhoods, which was mainly inhabited by South Asian expatriates. The accommodation was modest, a small apartment in an inconspicuous building, far removed from the glitz of the tourist districts. Anika commuted daily by metro to her workplace in Dubai Marina, a modern business district full of skyscrapers and marinas. The salary was generous by Indian standards, but in Dubai it was just enough to cover her living expenses and send some money to her family every month. Anika worked hard at the office, often more than 10 hours a day. She wanted to prove herself, to show that she was more than just a simple assistant. She learned quickly, took on additional tasks, and made a name for herself with her superiors through her reliability and creativity. Her colleagues were an international mix of Europeans, other Indians, Arabs, and Filipinos. The work culture in Dubai was demanding and competitive. Success was valued, weakness was not tolerated. In her free time, Anika tried to explore the city's social life, but always within her financial means and the cultural norms that applied in the United Arab Emirates. Dubai was a city of contradictions. On the one hand, modern and cosmopolitan, on the other hand, deeply rooted in Islamic traditions and conservative values. Public displays of affection were frowned upon. Alcohol consumption was only permitted in licensed hotels and restaurants, and extramarital relationships were technically illegal, even though the authorities often turned a blind eye to foreigners. Anika, who had grown up in a relatively liberal family in India, had to adapt to these new rules. She joined a group of young Indian expatriates who met regularly in cafes or took weekend trips to the beaches of Jumeirah. But despite these friendships, Anika often felt lonely. She missed her family, the familiar chaos of Indian cities, her mother's warmth. Dubai was impressive, but also cold and impersonal. In video calls with her family, she always tried to sound positive, talking about her professional successes and the beauty of the city. She didn't want her parents to worry or think their daughter had failed. It was in May 2023, almost 4 months after her arrival in Dubai, when Anika first met Vikram Malhotra. The encounter took place during a company event, a networking event for real estate professionals at one of the luxurious hotels on Jumeirah Beach. Anika's company had sent her as part of the marketing team to look after potential clients and make business contacts. She wore her best dress, an elegant but modest dark green outfit she had bought especially for such occasions, and tried to appear confident among the clearly more affluent guests. Vikram Malhotra immediately caught her eye. He was in his mid-40s, tall and well-groomed, with slightly greying temples that gave him a distinguished look. He wore a tailored suit, a Rolex glistened on his wrist, and he moved with the effortless confidence of a man accustomed to commanding a room. Vikram was a successful businessman, owner of several companies in real estate development and import-export. He was born in Delhi, studied in London, and settled in Dubai over 15 years ago, where he had built up a considerable fortune. He was married to Meera Malhotra, a woman from a wealthy business family in Mumbai, and had 2 children, a son and a daughter, both attending international schools. The first encounter between Anika and Vikram was seemingly coincidental. Anika was standing at the bar waiting for a glass of water when Vikram stepped up beside her and struck up a conversation. He asked about her work and showed interest in her perspective as a young professional from India. Anika was nervous at first, but soon spoke more freely about her experiences, ambitions, and challenges in Dubai. Vikram listened attentively, asked intelligent questions, and seemed impressed by her intelligence and ambition. At the end of the evening, they exchanged business cards. Vikram said casually, "If you ever need advice or want to talk about career opportunities, don't hesitate to contact me. I'm happy to help talented young people find their way in this city." It sounded generous and fatherly. Anika thanked him politely, without thinking much of it. In the weeks that followed, Vikram contacted her several times. First, it was an email with an article about trends in the real estate industry that he thought she would find interesting. Then, a WhatsApp message asking how she was doing. Finally, an invitation to a business dinner where he claimed he wanted to introduce her to someone who could help her career. Anika hesitated at first. She knew that in Dubai, as everywhere else in the world, professional boundaries were important. But Vikram seemed respectful and serious. He was an established businessman, and the opportunity to learn from someone with his experience seemed valuable. The first meeting took place at an upscale Indian restaurant in downtown Dubai. Vikram showed up alone, contrary to his suggestion that he would introduce someone. He apologized charmingly. "Unfortunately, my contact had to cancel, but I thought we could still have a nice conversation." The food was exquisite, far beyond what Anika could normally afford. Vikram talked about his business, his travels, his philosophy of success and ambition. He spoke in Hindi mixed with English, which created a certain intimacy and cultural connection. He asked Anika about her dreams, her goals, her fears. It felt like a mentoring conversation, and Anika felt flattered by the attention of such a successful man. Vikram naturally paid the bill and offered to drive Anika home. She politely declined and took a taxi instead. But when she arrived at her small apartment, she felt a strange mixture of excitement and unease. Vikram was charming, generous, and interested in her. But he was also married, significantly older, and she couldn't quite figure out what his intentions were. In the weeks that followed, Vikram intensified his efforts. The messages became more frequent, more personal. He sent Annika articles and books on personal development and business strategies. He invited her to more dinners, this time in even more exclusive locations. He began to give her gifts, first small things like an expensive notebook or an elegant pen, then larger gestures like a new smartphone, which she supposedly needed for her work. Every time Annika protested, Vikram waved it off. "It's nothing, just a little support. Think of it as an investment in your future." Annika sensed that the dynamic was changing. Vikram now talked more often about personal issues, about his allegedly unsatisfying marriage, about his loneliness despite his success. He hinted that Mira, his wife, no longer understood him, that she was only interested in his money and status. He began to compliment Annika in ways that went beyond the professional. He called her extraordinary, beautiful, the most intelligent young woman I've ever met. Annika felt flattered, but also increasingly uncomfortable. She knew this relationship was heading in a dangerous direction. In July 2023, about 2 months after their first encounter, Vikram made his first direct advance. After dinner at his favorite restaurant on Dubai Creek, he offered to drive Annika to an apartment he had allegedly recently purchased and wanted to show her. The apartment was located in a luxurious high-rise building in Dubai Marina. When they arrived, Annika realized that this was more than just a viewing. The apartment was already fully furnished with modern designer furniture, a breathtaking view, and an atmosphere clearly created for romantic encounters. Vikram poured champagne and sat down next to Annika on the large leather sofa. He took her hand and said softly, "Annika, I can no longer pretend that this is just a professional relationship. I have developed feelings for you. You are different from all the women I know. Intelligent, ambitious, beautiful. I want you in my life." Annika felt her heart racing. Part of her was flattered by the attention of such a powerful man. Another part knew that this was wrong. Vikram was married and had a family. She herself came from a conservative family that would never accept such a relationship. She tried to pull away, but Vikram was persistent. He talked about the advantages of a relationship with him, the doors he could open for her, the life they could have together. He emphasized that his marriage existed only on paper, that he and Mira led separate lives. He promised to be discreet, to protect her reputation. And he subtly made it clear that rejection could have consequences, not through direct threats, but through hints. "It would be a shame if our friendship ended. I've already started talking positively about you to some of my contacts." That night, Annika gave in. It was a decision she would later regret countless times. Vikram was experienced and persuasive, and Annika felt both overwhelmed and strangely powerless. What was supposed to be a one-time weakness quickly turned into a regular affair. In the months that followed, a complex relationship developed between Annika and Vikram that went far beyond a simple affair. Vikram rented the luxurious apartment in Dubai Marina for Annika, where he had originally lured her. He insisted that she move out of her modest accommodation in Dera. At first, Annika protested, but Vikram was adamant. "Why should you live in that small apartment when I can offer you something better? Consider it part of our agreement." The apartment cost more per month than Annika earned in 6 months. It was luxuriously furnished, had a rooftop infinity pool, and offered 24/7 concierge service. Vikram also began giving Annika money regularly. At first, it was gifts packaged as support for your career or so you don't have to worry about financial concerns. Then it became more direct. Monthly transfers of 10,000 dirhams, sometimes more. Annika sent some of the money to her family in India, making up stories about salary increases and bonus payments. Her parents were proud and relieved. They didn't know where the money really came from. The relationship followed a fixed rhythm. Vikram visited Annika 2 or 3 times a week at the apartment, usually late in the evening, after he claimed to have come from business appointments. He never stayed the whole night. On weekends, he was with his family. Annika learned to keep her questions about his wife and children to herself. Vikram made it clear that his family was off limits. He spoke of Meera with a mixture of contempt and indifference, describing her as a materialistic woman who was only interested in his wealth. Annika wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that their relationship was something special, not just a sleazy affair. But over time, Annika began to feel trapped in this situation. Vikram was controlling. He wanted to know where she was, who she was talking to, what she was doing. He installed an app on her phone, supposedly for security reasons, that allowed him to track her location. He advised her to limit her friendships with other young people, especially men. "I don't want anyone getting the wrong idea or spreading rumors." Annika began to distance herself from her roommates and colleagues. She made up excuses for why she couldn't go on group outings anymore. Vikram was also jealous and possessive. If Annika took too long to respond to his messages, he became suspicious. If she mentioned that she had worked with male colleagues, he asked probing questions. His generosity came with expectations. He saw Annika as his property, as something he had invested in and now owned. At the same time, Vikram could be incredibly charming and generous. He took Annika on short trips to Abu Dhabi and Muscat. He bought her designer clothes and jewelry. He introduced her to discreet business contacts who actually helped her professionally. Annika felt torn between gratitude and discomfort, between the luxury he offered her and the feeling that she had sold her soul. In November 2023, Annika began to have serious doubts about her situation. She had a conversation with her mother, who asked if there was a special man in her life in Dubai. Annika lied and said no, but after the conversation, she cried for hours. She realized she was trapped in a relationship that had no future. Vikram would never leave his wife. She was his mistress, his dirty secret, nothing more. She began to think about how she could get out of this situation. But Vikram seemed to sense her thoughts. He became more attentive, gave her bigger gifts, and vaguely promised a future together. And he subtly reminded her of her dependence on him, the apartment, the money, the contacts. Without him, she would fall back into her small life. Annika felt paralyzed, unable to leave, unable to stay. What Annika didn't know was that Vikram's wife, Meera, was slowly beginning to suspect something, and that this suspicion would lead to a catastrophe that no one could have foreseen. Meera Malhotra was not a naive wife. At 43, she had enough life experience to recognize the signs of an affair. Vikram came home late, smelled of strange perfume, and was absent-minded during family dinners. His explanations about business meetings and appointments were becoming increasingly flimsy. Meera had been suspicious before, but this time it was different. This time, she sensed that this woman posed a real threat. In December 2023, Meera hired a private investigator. In Dubai, this was possible discreetly if you had the right contacts and were willing to pay for it. The detective, a former police officer named Hassan al-Mansouri, took only 2 weeks to uncover Vikram's secret. He followed him to the apartment in Dubai Marina, photographed him entering and leaving, and identified Annika through her occasional visits. Hassan gave Meera a detailed report: name, age, workplace, origin, even photos of Annika standing on the roof terrace of the building, looking out over the Gulf. Meera felt a mixture of anger, hurt, and ice-cold determination. She had tolerated a lot in the 19 years of their marriage. She had ignored Vikram's occasional affairs with businesswomen or casual acquaintances as long as they remained discreet and did not jeopardize her position as his wife. But this was different. Vikram had given this young woman an apartment, gave her money regularly, spent real time with her. This wasn't just sex, it was a relationship. And Meera couldn't accept that. Meera came from a powerful business family in Mumbai. Her father controlled hundreds of millions of dollars worth of real estate. Her two brothers were influential lawyers and entrepreneurs. The Malhotras and the Sharmas, Meera's birth family, were intertwined through complex business relationships and social connections. A public divorce or scandal would damage both families, especially their children, who were growing up in Dubai's elite Indian community. Meera decided to resolve the situation in her own way. She did not confront Vikram directly. Instead, she began to devise a plan. She would remove this Anika Desai from her husband's life, but in a way that would leave no trace leading back to her. In early January 2024, Meera contacted a woman named Shabana Qureshi through an intermediary. Shabana was well known in certain circles in Dubai, a woman with connections to the underworld who solved discreet problems. She had previously worked for various wealthy families when unwelcome employees, business partners or lovers needed to be eliminated, not necessarily physically, but removed from the lives of her clients. The meeting took place in a private room at a luxury hotel on the creek. Meera explained the situation coolly and matter-of-factly. She wanted Anika to leave Dubai, voluntarily or by force. Shabana suggested various methods: blackmail, threats, destruction of her work visa, perhaps even false accusations to the authorities. In the Emirates, foreigners could easily lose their residence permits and be deported. But Meera wanted more than just Anika's departure. She wanted this woman to suffer, to understand what it meant to mess with the wrong people. "I want her to disappear," Meera said in a cold voice, "permanently." Shabana understood the implication. She hesitated for a moment, then named a sum, $200,000. Meera agreed without hesitation. In the weeks that followed, Shabana began to observe Anika. She learned her routines, her few remaining friends, her weaknesses. At the same time, she began to develop a plan. Direct murder would be too risky and would raise too many questions. Instead, it would have to look like an accident, a suicide, or a crime committed by a third party. At the end of January, Shabana took her first step. She sent Anika an anonymous message via Instagram. "I know about you and Vikram. His wife knows too. You're in danger." Anika was shocked and frightened. She confronted Vikram, who dismissed the message as nonsense but seemed nervous himself. He assured Anika that Meera knew nothing and that he would protect her. But Anika's fear grew. In the weeks that followed, Anika received more threatening messages and anonymous calls. Someone was obviously following her. She could sense it when she left the building, sometimes seeing the same dark SUV parked on her street. She told Vikram about it, but he seemed to downplay the situation. "This is Dubai. There's surveillance and SUVs everywhere here," he said. But Anika felt that something terrible was about to happen. In March 2024, the situation came to a head. Vikram and Meera had a heated argument. She finally confronted him with what she knew. Vikram initially denied it, but then partially admitted it. He promised to end the affair, but Meera didn't believe him. She had already set her plan in motion, and there was no turning back. On the evening of March 15th, Anika received a message from an unknown number. "If you value your life, leave Dubai immediately. You have 3 days." Anika was desperate. She called Vikram, but he didn't answer the phone. She seriously considered just running away, going back to India. But at the same time, she felt anger. Why should she be the one to leave? She hadn't done anything criminal. Vikram was the one who had lied and cheated. In a moment of desperation and defiance, Annika decided to confront Meera directly. On the morning of March 18, 2024, Annika made a decision that would cost her her life. She had spent the night sleepless, tormented by fear and anger. The anonymous threats had not stopped, and Vikram had been unreachable for 2 days. His calls went straight to voicemail. His messages remained unanswered. Annika felt completely alone and betrayed. She decided to seek out Meera Malhotra in person. It was a desperate, naive plan. Annika imagined that she could talk to Meera woman to woman, that perhaps they would find a solution. Maybe Meera would understand that Annika herself was a victim, manipulated by a man who had lied to both women. In her desperation, Annika clung to this hopeful idea. From Vikram's occasional mentions, Annika knew that the Malhotras lived in a villa in Emirates Hills, one of Dubai's most exclusive residential areas, where only the super-rich lived. She found the exact address through a simple online search. On the afternoon of March 18th, she took a taxi to the guarded complex. The security guard at the entrance was initially suspicious, but Annika lied skillfully. She pretended to be a business colleague of Meera's who needed to discuss an important matter. After a brief phone call, the contents of which Annika could not hear, the guard let her pass. That should have been Annika's first warning. Meera was expecting her. The Malhotra's villa was impressive, a modern 2-story property with an immaculate facade, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens and a pool that sparkled in the afternoon light. A Filipino housekeeper opened the door and led Annika into a luxuriously furnished living room with floor-to-ceiling windows and expensive artwork on the walls. Meera appeared 10 minutes later. She was an elegant woman, slim and well-groomed, dressed in an expensive silk salwar kameez. Her face was expressionless, her eyes cold. She looked Annika up and down with undisguised contempt. "So you're the little whore who's trying to destroy my family," Meera said in Hindi, her voice cutting like a knife. Annika felt her courage waning, but she tried to remain calm. "Mrs. Malhotra, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to—" "Shut up," Meera interrupted sharply. "You come into my house and dare to speak to me. Do you know who I am? Do you know what I can do to people like you?" Annika tried to explain that Vikram had manipulated her, that she wanted to end the relationship, that she just wanted to be left in peace. But Meera wasn't listening. To her, Annika was nothing more than a cheap opportunist who had tried to latch onto a rich man. "You think you're special?" Meera sneered. "You're the 3rd or 4th slut my husband has wasted his time with. But you're the first one who was stupid enough to actually believe you meant something to him." The words hit Annika like blows. Vikram's declarations of love and future, his promises, had all been lies. She was indeed just one of many. Meera stepped closer, her face contorted with rage. "You will leave Dubai. Tonight, you will return everything Vikram has given you, and you will never contact him again. If you don't, I'll make sure you're deported, but not before I destroy your reputation and that of your family in India. I have connections, girl. I can make your life hell." Annika, humiliated and frightened, could only nod. She just wanted to get away, back to the relative safety of her apartment. She mumbled an apology and turned toward the door. But then something happened that changed everything. As Annika walked to the door, she took her phone out of her purse. In her nervousness, she had forgotten that a recording app was running, which she had activated before entering the house as a precaution. Meera saw the flashing red light on the screen. "You recorded that?" Meera screamed, snatching the phone from Annika's hand. She saw the conversation saved, her own threats recorded. At that moment, Meera completely lost control. She shouted something in Arabic, and suddenly two men appeared in the room who had apparently been nearby the whole time. One of them was tall and muscular, the other smaller but with a hard, dangerous expression on his face. Shabana Qureshi's men. "She recorded us," Mira said to the men in a choked voice. "She has evidence." Annika realized too late what trap she had fallen into. She tried to run for the door, but the larger man grabbed her arm. Annika screamed, but the villa was remote and no one would hear her. What happened in the next few hours could only be reconstructed later through forensic evidence. The men forced Annika into a room on the upper floor. Mira ordered them to solve the problem permanently. She didn't want any more witnesses, no recordings, no threat to her family. Annika was drugged and taken to a vehicle. Chapter 4. The last day, Annika woke up in complete darkness with a pounding headache. Her hands were tied behind her back and a cloth was tied around her mouth. She was lying on a hard floor that smelled of gasoline and dust. The quiet hum of an engine and the rocking motion told her she was in a moving vehicle. Panic overwhelmed her. She tried to scream, but the gag muffled every sound. The vehicle finally stopped after what seemed like hours to Annika. She heard doors opening, rough voices speaking Arabic. Then she was roughly pulled up and dragged out of the car. Her eyes, accustomed to the darkness, were blinded by the bright sunlight. As her vision cleared, she realized she was somewhere in the desert, far outside Dubai. All around her was endless sand, no buildings, no roads, not a soul in sight, just her and her kidnappers. The two men who had taken her from Mira's villa stood in front of her. The taller one lit a cigarette and looked at Annika with cold indifference. The shorter, more nervous-looking man was talking quietly on the phone. Annika could understand fragments of Arabic. "Yes, we're here. What should we do?" "Understood." When the call ended, the smaller man turned to his accomplice. They discussed briefly. Then the taller man approached Annika. He removed the gag from her mouth, but left her hands bound. "Please," Annika whispered hoarsely, "please let me go. I haven't done anything. I won't tell anyone, I swear." The man did not answer. Instead, he pulled out a water bottle and held it to Annika's lips. She drank greedily, not knowing when she would have the opportunity again. The man seemed almost sympathetic for a moment, but then his expression hardened again. "It's nothing personal," he finally said in broken English, "but you've upset the wrong person. This is Dubai. Here the rich play by their own rules." Annika began to cry. She thought of her parents in Pune, who would never know what had really happened to their daughter, of her younger siblings, who had admired her, of the dreams she had had when she came to Dubai over a year ago, full of hope and ambition. It all ended here, in this God-forsaken desert. But then something unexpected happened. The smaller man received another call. He spoke briefly, his expression changing, becoming uncertain. He argued with the person on the other end, his voice becoming sharper. Finally, he ended the call and turned to his partner. "There's a problem," he said in Arabic. "Shabana says the police have been alerted. Someone reported the kidnapping. We have to leave immediately." The taller man cursed. "What do we do with her?" "Leave her here. She won't make it back alive. The desert will finish her off." They didn't discuss it further. Within seconds, they were both back in the vehicle. The engine roared, and the car sped away, leaving Annika bound and alone in the scorching desert heat. Annika watched the vehicle until it was just a speck of dust on the horizon. Then she was completely alone. The sun was high in the sky, and the temperature must have been over 40 degrees. Annika knew she wouldn't survive long without water and shade. She desperately tried to free her hands from the restraints, but they were tied too tightly. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky, the heat becoming unbearable. Annika's lips dried out, her skin burned. She lost track of time, drifting between consciousness and delirium. In her mind, she saw her mother, heard her voice, felt her embrace. As the sun finally began to set, and the desert cooled slightly, Annika heard a noise in the distance. At first, she thought it was a hallucination, but the noise grew louder, clearer, the sound of an engine, then voices. With her last ounce of strength, Annika tried to scream, but her voice was only a croak, but it was enough. Minutes later, figures appeared over a dune. 2 Bedouin shepherds in an old pickup truck, taking their goats to the watering hole. They found Annika, semi-conscious, dehydrated but alive. The shepherds immediately called the police. Within an hour, a rescue helicopter arrived. Annika was taken to Rashid Hospital in Dubai, where doctors fought to save her life. She was severely dehydrated, suffering from heat stroke, and traumatized, but she would survive. However, her rescue also marked the beginning of a catastrophe for others, because Annika could speak, and she would tell everything that had happened. Inspector Khalid al-Rashidi of the Dubai Police Criminal Investigation Department sat at Annika Desai's bedside and listened to a story that was extraordinary even for his 20 years of experience. Annika, still weak but lucid, told him everything. The affair with Vikram Malhotra, the threats, the confrontation with Mira, the kidnapping. Khalid was an experienced investigator who knew that dark secrets often lurked behind Dubai's glittering facades. But an attempted murder orchestrated by a woman from India's upper class was shocking even to him. He also knew that this case would be politically sensitive. The Malhotras were influential, with connections to powerful business people and politicians. "Miss Desai," Khalid said calmly, "I promise you that we will investigate every aspect of your story. But you must understand that we need evidence. Do you have anything to support your statements?" Annika remembered her phone, the recording of her conversation with Mira, but the phone was gone, probably destroyed by the kidnappers. Her hopes sank, but then she mentioned the security cameras in Emirates Hills, which must have recorded her entering and leaving the villa. Khalid nodded. That was a start. Within hours, his team had obtained the surveillance footage from the entrance to the residential complex. The videos clearly showed Annika entering the Malhotra's villa at 3:47 p.m. on March 18th, but they never showed her leaving. Instead, at 7:23 p.m., a dark SUV with tinted windows left the property, the same type of vehicle Annika had described. The police acted quickly. On the morning of March 20th, Mira Malhotra and Vikram Malhotra were summoned for questioning. At the same time, investigators searched their villa and confiscated phones, computers, and surveillance footage from inside the house. Mira appeared with a team of expensive lawyers. She initially denied everything, claiming she had never met Annika. But when investigators showed her the surveillance videos and mentioned that forensic teams had already secured DNA evidence in her home, her facade began to crumble. Vikram, for his part, had broken down. He admitted to the affair but denied any knowledge of Mira's plans. He claimed to be a victim, caught between his wife and his mistress. Investigators didn't quite believe him, but Vikram was not their prime suspect. The breakthrough came when the police identified Shabana Qureshi. Bank records showed a transfer of $200,000 from an account linked to Mira to an offshore company owned by Shabana. Under pressure, Shabana finally admitted that she had been hired by Mira and identified the 2 men who had kidnapped Annika. On March 25, 2024, Mira Malhotra was officially arrested for attempted murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. The news sent shockwaves through Dubai's Indian community. Chapter 6. Justice and Shadows. Mira Malhotra's trial began in June 2024 and became one of the most high-profile court cases in Dubai's history. The media reported daily on the fallen socialite who had tried to have her husband's mistress murdered. For the public, it was a story of jealousy, revenge, and the dark side of luxury living. Mira's lawyers desperately tried to portray their client as an emotionally disturbed wife who had acted under extreme psychological pressure. They argued that Annika was a blackmailer who wanted to destroy the Malhotra family, but the evidence was overwhelming. The bank transfer, Shabana's testimony, the surveillance videos, Annika's injuries. On September 15, 2024, Meera Malhotra was found guilty on all counts. The court sentenced her to 25 years in prison for attempted murder and kidnapping. The two men who had taken Annika to the desert received 20 years each. Shabana Qureshi got 15 years for her role as an intermediary. Vikram Malhotra was never criminally charged, but his life was destroyed. His business partners distanced themselves. His reputation was ruined. His two children, ashamed and traumatized, were sent to relatives in India. Vikram sold his shares in his companies well below their value and quietly left Dubai in October 2024. For Annika, the victory was bitter. She had survived and obtained justice, but the price was high. The story had attracted international attention. Her name and face were all over the news. In India, she was celebrated by some as a heroine who had fought against powerful oppressors, condemned by others as a morally corrupt woman who had destroyed a marriage. Her family in Pune was faced with shame. Neighbors whispered, distant relatives broke off contact. Annika's younger sister had difficulty finding a marriage partner because the family was now considered tainted. Her father, Rajesh, visibly aged within months, his health deteriorating. Annika herself never returned to Dubai. She flew directly from Dubai to Pune after the trial ended, but she found no peace in her hometown either. The memories, the nightmares, the stares of people on the street, it was all too much. In November 2024, 2 months after Meera's conviction, Annika disappeared from Pune without a trace. Her family reported her missing. The police investigated but found no evidence of a crime. Some speculated that she had fled to another city under a false name to start a new life. Others whispered darker suspicions that Meera's family or remaining allies had taken revenge. The truth about Annika's disappearance was never clarified. Her case remains open, a grim postscript to an already tragic story. In Dubai, life went on as it always had. The skyscrapers continued to glisten in the sunlight, luxury cars raced along the highways, and new dreamers arrived from all over the world, seeking their fortune in the city of superlatives. But for those who knew Annika's story, an uncomfortable truth remained. Behind every glittering facade, there can be hidden depths, and sometimes the price of a dream is higher than one could ever imagine.